I'm talking about whether something exists or not, and you brought in value. You brought in why are you living? What are you living for? Why are you good? Something like that. Like, what is your purpose? And the question that I was asking was very much about what exists. And if God does not exist, frankly, if nothing above me exists, that doesn't imply that I have nothing to live for.
Right.
And I do definitely have things to live for that I can specifically point to that have nothing to do with whether there's a God.
Right. That's right. I know that.
Okay, then I don't understand why there's a connection there.
For some reason, you and the two gentlemen before, I'm not sure that you guys respect language the way I do.
How do you mean?
I agree with those who say that language can just be a power move to assert your power. And that happens at times. But I'm convinced that if we take language seriously and if we listen to each other, we can have meaningful conversation. I thought I just said to you, tonight, when you put your head on your pillow, like it or not, you're going to have to acknowledge you're living for something or someone.
Yes.
Like it or not, when I put my head on my pillow tonight, I'm going to have to acknowledge I'm living for someone or something.
I agree with that.
We both have faith. Now, you have said to me crystal clearly that there is not enough evidence that God exists, and you didn't want to hear me go over that evidence, and I respect that. And you have also clearly said that there's not enough evidence that Jesus Christ is reliable. Fine, no problem. But when you say to me, the reason you can't believe that God exists, the reason you can't believe that Jesus Christ is the truth is because of lack of evidence, in order not to be an intellectual hypocrite, I'm asking you, what do you live for, and what's this preponderance of evidence that convinces you that this option is superior to God, to Christ?
I can answer the question. I just didn't think it was relevant to the conversation. I believe in flourishing, in human flourishing, in eudaimonia. I believe that we have goodness in our lives, that there are good things to experience, good things to learn and be. I mean, there is an inherent goodness to human life that has no relationship with anything higher than humanity. And once you acknowledge that there's something higher than humanity, it belittles us. I specifically, just so I don't get off topic, that what I live for is flourishing.
Who defines flourishing?
I do, for myself.
Fine. And the KKK defines flourishing for themselves.
That's fine.
It's
that doesn't
fine?
mean they're right.
And the terrorists who bombed and shot people in Paris define flourishing for themselves.
Yeah, but now you're making, so you asked what I live for. You did not say, do I believe in some sort of absolute good?
I did not. I asked you, how do you define flourishing? Who defines flourishing?
We each define flourishing.
Okay. Now, if you think about it, you're going to realize you've thought it one way, defined flourishing one way.
That's fine.
The terrorists have obviously defined it another way.
That's fine.
Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's all relative.
I'm not talking about ethics. That's why I said this was outside of the realm of the conversation. This is an
Flourishing
ethical
does not
question.
include ethics?
Excuse me?
Flourishing does not include ethics?
You asked what I live for.
Yeah, flourishing, you said.
Yeah, that's not an ethical statement. That's a
Does that
psychological
include
statement.
ethics? To flourish as a human being, does that include understanding what's good? I thought you used the word goodness.
It includes goodness. It doesn't understand it does not include the understanding of goodness.
It includes goodness, but not the understanding of goodness.
My moral imperative is
language
to
is breaking
flourish.
down.
No, my moral imperative is to flourish. My moral imperative is not. It does not include having some sort of ultimate goodness. I don't have that claim on reality. I just said earlier in my honest question, one that I've asked of priests in the past when I was really questioning. My honest question is faith compatible with this idea? That's a very specific question. Okay.
With flourishing?
With the fact that my logic is limited, I could be wrong. I know that I could be wrong. When you take that same idea and apply it to flourishing, yes, I am going to do my utmost to be a good person, but that does not mean that I know what good is. I don't lay any sort of claim to absolute goodness.
Like it or not, you have to make a judgment call on what the terrorists did in Paris. They define that as flourishing, as their goodness. Now, you just can't live in a vacuum and say, well, it really doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. You have to make a judgment call. Is that right or wrong? You have to make a judgment call. Is the KKK right or wrong? in denigrating black people and elevating Aryan supremacy. You can't just live in a vacuum and say, well, it's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. It's real life. So who defines flourishing? And if you define it, then what makes your definition right and the KKK or the terrorist definition wrong?
Our disagreement isn't about what flourishing is. Our disagreement seems to be that you think that there has to be this objective rule, and if I'm not following it, you even specifically said it earlier, that's why I stood up. You accused anyone who does not have an absolute idea of ethics as being a relativist. You're accusing me of being a relativist and saying that I believe this and someone else believes that, and that we're both right in our own spheres. And there are other ethical views besides absolutism and relativism. Like you can't set up this false dichotomy and say either I'm making some sort of absolute claim or what I'm saying is useless. That's just totally unfair and doesn't match our human experience. So, I mean,
It matches my experience totally, as it does Camus, Sartre, and Nietzsche, Bertrand Russell, and all the great atheistic thinkers who had the intellectual honesty to acknowledge if there is no God, there is no mind prior to the human mind, which means it's obviously the human mind that defines justice and injustice, what it means to flourish or not flourish, what it means to live a good life or not to live a good life. It's all the creation of the human mind. It's a human fantasy. My fantasy is not superior to your fantasy. Your fantasy is not superior to my fantasy. It's all relative. And I'm saying, sir, I don't think you can live that way. I think,
agree.
I could be wrong, I think you live as if the terrorist attacks in Paris, France were absolutely wrong. You see, you can't say that if you're going to hold to what you believe in, which is there is no God, morality is relative. I define flourishing, I define goodness for myself. Fine. If what you say is true, if what you believe is true, then have the intellectual honesty to say the terrorists define good, flourishing life their own way. They're not wrong, I'm not right. It's all in taste. It's a matter of taste.
In case it's not obvious, I do think that atrocities are wrong. In case it's not obvious, I think that there are incredibly bad things happening in the world and that we have a personal responsibility to stand up and do something about it.
I am sure you do.
Our disagreement's not about that. Our disagreement is about whether there's an intermediate ground, not even intermediate, putting it on a spectrum is false, but something that's neither absolutism nor relativism. An example from a relatively Christian person is Immanuel Kant. He said that there is a transcendental mind, that people come together, not literally come together, but there is an understanding among humans of what is right and wrong. And it's not an individual person, but neither is it an absolute thing. There are other ways of looking at this besides this false dichotomy. So that I think that maybe I'm getting a little too technical, but I mean, honestly, I wanted to ask the question about, given that I just don't see the evidence, but is the knowledge of my own lack enough to admit faith? And it seems like what you're saying is, no, you have to admit the evidence. And what that means to me is that I can't have faith then. So that's my conclusion here, unless you'd like to try to answer that question.
The reason it's so frustrating to talk with you is because I don't think you listen to me very carefully.
I'm sorry. I feel like I have been. I'm sorry if we're not.
I said, sir, you have faith. I have faith. Don't you remember I talked about tonight? Both of us are going to put our heads on our pillows. Sure, I went over it twice with you.
Yes, but that's
you're very
not
smart.
answering
Well,
my
there's a
question.
problem. Yes, I am answering your question. Not with a yes/no answer. Not with a yes/no answer. I'm trying to point out to you that every atheist, every agnostic, every Muslim, Jew, Christian, we all have faith. What does that mean? It means that all of us have to deal with the basic fundamental questions. Why is a human being valuable? Is there a purpose to life? Why do I behave ethically the way I do? Is there life after death or is there not? None of us can scientifically prove that our answers to any of those four questions are absolutely true. Instead, they are philosophical questions that you have to use logic, experience, observation to answer. We all answer them, though. All of us have answers to the question, is a human being worth anything? Yes or no? Is there a purpose to life? Yes or no? Is it right or wrong to bomb people in Paris and be part of the KKK? Yes or no? Is there life after death or not? Yes. We all have to struggle with those issues. You have no choice. Why? Because you have to live life. That's why. You all answer them. Now guess what? All of us have faith when we answer those questions. None of us can prove that our answers to any of those questions is right. So sir, please don't walk away from here telling me or thinking that I didn't say you have faith. I know you have got faith. Same way I've got faith. You just have a different faith from me. That's all. An atheist has faith, just a different faith than I do. We all have faith, trusting that something is true, not because we can prove it, but hopefully because we've got evidence. And that's why I pressed you, sir, and said, what's your faith in, and what's the evidence that whatever it is that you believe in is reliable?